CNAs, those that work in retail. One of the things that I've been able to do is that I'm working and I support programs like PERKS, tiny homes programs, that actually offer housing to the homeless, to struggling veterans, to those that just looking for other options for housing. So we're going to have to work with, again, making it a priority to actually subsidize and promote those organizations that help our residents gain the economic skills and the training and workforce that they need to be able to purchase housing, as well as those programs that I've worked for and worked with in the past that helps those constituents actually gain housing and purchase housing to become homeowners. So as a candidate and as a council member, affordable housing will be a #1 priority.
Thank you. Kennedy Kenyon.
So, as mentioned, there's an affordable housing plan that the city government put out, in regards to $60 million over a 10-year period to develop 2,400 units of affordable housing. And one, we don't have 10 years. This is something that has to happen tomorrow. People are sleeping on park benches today. And that people in this room are going to be wondering where they're going to live when they graduate college. So this is something that has to be dealt with right now, and it's not going to happen with the development of luxury apartments continuing to hike up the rent of everybody else surrounding, that we can transform that 85 acres of land under the dome into economic development and genuine affordable housing, where we can make sure that the land on Jordan Park is placed into the hands of the residents that live there, and that we can make sure that nobody is spending more than 25% of the area median income towards rent alone. 54% of the average black family's income goes towards, rent, and that's more than half of their income going towards living expenses. And we also want to help low-income and black families to be able to keep their homes, update their homes, versus predatory land developers putting code enforcements on them.
Thank you. Candidate Wheeler Bowman.
Right. So the question was, how urgent is the need for affordable housing? To me, it's very urgent, and it is a top priority of mine, and that is why I voted to set $15 million aside of penny for Pinellas money, so that we can start purchasing land. I am not saying that that will solve the entire issue, but it is a start. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to have our first lightning round question. Oh, well, I didn't ask for the wild card. I'm so sorry. Okay, candidate Blackman, wild card, please.
So the question was, how urgent is the affordable housing issue, and how do we address it? I think it's very urgent. How do we address that? I've done my entire career, I've made in the housing sector. So I've taken older buildings, renovated them, and rented them out. I've always been able to do it far below the median the median price for the city, and I've been able to do it affordably. How is that? Through research, hard work, and just knowledge of the different neighborhoods. So the other day, I consult, literally in the last 7 days, a friend of mine called me with a plan. He said, how do we solve the affordable housing crisis? I applaud what City Council is moving forward with, which is smaller square footage minimums for housing units. So they've decreased the square footage you need for a studio, for a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom. People don't want the big places like they used to have. Parking densities have been decreased. We need to look towards a more micro housing solution so we can get more units on fewer lots, because, hey, take it, let's be real, St. Petersburg's been built out since the late 50s, essentially. So this is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other wild cards? I apologize. Okay, now we're going to have our first lightning round question, and we are going to start with candidate Acosta. And this question is, when was the last time you took mass transit in St. Petersburg?
Oh,
So it's not a yes or no, just
Sure.
the most.
I think that was last week. Yes, I took the bus from downtown up to my house, and it was fantastic.
Thank you. Candidate Cox.
The last time I used our mass transit system, having returned here in '85, was probably about in 1995.
Thank you. Fig Sanders.
I'm not sure if one of the trolleys would be considered mass transit, but they do the tours that I took on the Deuces.
Thank you. Candidate Kenyon.
2015.
Wheeler Bowman.
2 years ago.
And candidate Blackman.
This year.
And candidate Hornbeck.
Going with what Ms. Fig Sanders said, if the trolley counts, then that would be on my wedding day last November.
Oh, congratulations. Okay, this next question will go to the candidates in District 1 and 3. And this is a question about the budget. The first to answer will be candidate Hornbeck with a 60-second response. If elected, what steps would you want to see taken to put our city on a firmer financial footing?
One of my biggest issues is my Youth First initiative, and in that it's a comprehensive approach, but one of the biggest components is affordable youth programs. What's great about that is, well, first let me start off by saying I had the privileges from the ages of 9 to 14 to be able to attend Walter Fuller Community Center, where I met some of my best friends. And I want to make sure that every kid, despite their socioeconomic background, has access to these programs. I want to take the kids off the street and put them into fitness and social-driven programs. And that might sound expensive, right? Subsidizing kids for after school and summer camp, but it's a good investment. Nationwide, for every dollar that we spend on affordable youth programs and youth intervention, it yields a savings of over $4. So investing in our youth is the best investment we can make.
Thank you. Candidate Costa.
A very interesting question. What is a firmer footing? It's so relative, right? Each one of us at our budgets at home would like to have so much in savings, so much in investments, so much for retirement. Our next door neighbor might have entirely different numbers that they're comfortable with. As familiar as I am, to the extent that I am familiar with our budget, we're actually in pretty good standing. We don't have problems selling our bonds to fund a lot of the infrastructure projects we have going on. I think our credit rating, our bond rating is positive. I think it's in the upper B's, if not lower A's. As always, building a deeper emergency fund is beneficial in the long run, but we do have immediate needs. Affordable housing is one we've been talking about right now, plus handling our flooding issues, other infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So it's always a balancing act that we have to play. But the first thing to resolve in any conversation I would have with a constituent on city finances is, what do you consider being a firm foundation? And then once we agree on that, then we see where we have to go.
Thank you. And candidate Blackman.
So the question was on the budget, how do we put it on stronger footing? I was at the city council meeting last Thursday where the budget was discussed, and I'd say basically we need to focus on environment and infrastructure first. So it's, kind of if you laugh now, you'll cry later. We need to spend the money now to make sure we take care of our environment and our infrastructure. If you ignore a problem with a pothole or a sewage pipe, it's only going to get worse and worse, and it's going to cost you more down the line. Or you're going to get into a big mess like we did before, where we have consent orders that we end up violating with the state, or they're changing the system now for fines for dumping sewage. So I think putting as much money towards infrastructure and environment as we can. Also, none of this will be up for debate if our environment gets wiped out. So we really need to make sure we take environmental steps now to make sure we're on good financial footing. And the last note I'll make that's somewhat unrelated, we need to watch our spending always and not spend money on art projects for the pier that cost $3-4 million that are not popular. That can be utilized other places, and we could have had a local artist do it for much less or at the cost of materials for the exposure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any wild cards? Yes, Kennedy Kenyon.
So to put the city on, firm ground financially and otherwise, I think it would be making sure that everybody in the city had the ability to feed, clothe, and house themselves. And that's the center of my platform. The platform is reparations and economic development to the Black community as a means to create genuine social and economic justice throughout the city. And, so it can deal with the question of genuine affordable housing, deal with fixing our sewage infrastructure and, making sure that our environment is sound. And that's the center of my platform. I really want to see, defunding of the police and reallocating those resources to actually benefiting the people. That, we should not be spending more money trying to contain the Black community to facilitate the process of gentrifying Black people out of the city. That all of those resources should be invested in making sure that our quality of life is preserved, that everybody in the city has a future. And, right now the city spends something like 1/5 of its entire budget towards the police. And, that's only for the Black community. So let's bring those resources into the hands of the people.
Thank you. Okay, this next question goes to the District 5 and District 7 candidates. This is an issue that's come up so far regarding food deserts, and it is, the existence of food deserts in St. Petersburg is more than a simple inconvenience, as they inhibit access to fresh produce and nutritious food. How can we reduce or eliminate them? And the first to respond to this will be candidate Fig Sanders with 60-second responses.
When you think of District 5 and the desert area, the very first place that you think of is on 18th Avenue and 22nd Street, where we started with Walmart, and then we started with Sweet Bay, and now there's nothing there. And although the city is making a wonderful effort to bring fresh produce into the community and actually providing the transportation to the residents, that's not going to fix our food desert. The residents that live around those areas, we're having a hard time bringing in anyone that will provide that, because the residents can't afford to actually sustain that type of establishment, that grocery store, to actually have that happen. One of the things that I think we're going to have to do, and I know that we've seen it happen with the Dollar Generals and the smaller stores actually providing groceries, and that is what we've resolved to, is actually the smaller chains providing that. But I think we're going to have to support our co-op grocery stores to help promote them, and also to help promote the food desert as far as fresh vegetables is concerned.
Thank you. Candidate Kenyon.
You know, first I want to say, I think it's, really ironic that this is a question because, while the city government touts itself on being this progressive place where the sun shines on all, we're having this discussion which literally points out that that is not the case. And that the South Side, in particular the Black community, is living under these horrible conditions. And that putting a Walmart or Sweet Bay, these corporate chains, these people that come, they extract capital from our community and then leave, was not the solution. That genuine economic development in our hands, because before the Dome, when there was a gas plant, we had those businesses, we had that produce, we had the things that we needed. Before the destruction of 22nd Street Business District with an interstate, we had those things on that side of the community, on that side of town. So we can reestablish all of those things through reparations and economic development. We can bring the same kind of development that's happening downtown, minus the gentrification, into the South Side. That's what we need to see.
Thank you. Candidate Wheeler Bowman.
Thank you. We're definitely going to have to go with smaller chains, or the grocery co-ops. Over in the South Side, it's not just 18th Avenue, it's also 62nd Avenue South. There hasn't been a grocery store in there for years. So we definitely need to look at the grocery co-ops or the smaller chains to come in there.
Thank you. And Candidate Cox.
Yes, thank you. The issue of the food deserts has to be looked at from a number of perspectives. One, you have to have a livable wage so you can actually meet the needs of your family and as well as your individual needs. So we got to really talk about advocating for that very strongly. Secondly, we're going to have to make sure that those in our communities find themselves being educated and pursuing careers that are meaningful and that are gainful in terms of their outcomes so that they can meet their needs. Thirdly, we cannot rely on the big chains. We have parcels here in District 5 that have not been totally utilized and developed. They're on 62nd Avenue South, they're on Tangerine. We have to be very diligent about making certain that those opportunities are seized and developed so people can actually have food opportunities right there. Fourthly, we have safety net services and we have programs that can help in the interim while those kinds of long-term opportunities are being developed. We have safety net services that are developed and available through the Juvenile Welfare Board, through our faith-based community as well.
Thank you very much. And I saw a wild card from candidate Hornbeck.
Tomorrow, we are all going to be speaking at the Chamber of Commerce, Politics and Popcorn, but I don't want you to go to that. The event I want you to go with is my wife's going to be teaming up with Wendy Wesley to address this issue. What they've been promoting is community-owned grocery co-op, and I did my research on it, and I'll tell you, from all the things that I've studied, that is the most viable way to address this issue. In my opening remarks, I said that this is one of the biggest issues facing Midtown. And my wife sees it as a pediatrician, kids that don't have access to fresh fruit and fresh vegetables, and that have diabetes. We need to address this issue. So when you go home, do your own research, look up Wendy Wesley's work.
Thank you. So next, we are going to have a wild card round and lightning. There's no such thing as a wild. So just want to make sure you're paying attention out there. Okay, lightning round. Okay, the first candidate to respond to this lightning round will be candidate Kanian. And the question, so this is a yes or no answer. Do you support using additional city resources to make it more attractive for the Tampa Bay Rays to stay in St. Pete?
No.
Wheeler Bowman,
No.
and then this candidate Blackman.
Yes.
As long as it is a good investment for the city of St. Pete.
Acosta.
Yeah, I'll very politely object to the question. This isn't a yes or no question. It depends, and definitely has to be in the best interest of everybody in the city, not just the billionaire, millionaire owners of a baseball team.
Thank you, candidate Cox.
Yes, with the proper negotiation so that it's a win-win for the community that's suffered because of their existence, and yes, because they can be an economic engine for the rest of the citizens here.
Thank you, and candidate Vic Sanders.
Yes.
Thank you. And this next question will be for all the candidates, and we're going to start first with candidate Hornbeck in this round. And this question is, what is your top priority for the redevelopment of Tropicana Field?
If you go onto my website, votehornbeck.com, you'll see that I would like to keep the Rays in St. Pete so long as it continues to be a positive financial benefit to the citizens. I'm not going to keep the Rays here because I'm a fan. The last study that was done in 2008 said the Rays bring in between $100 to $200 million a year. And if they continue to be a positive financial impact, then yes, I'd like to keep the Rays, but I don't think that we should keep them on Tropicana Field. That site's tainted. It's not good for baseball. Where we need to move them is to a much smaller stadium. The average attendance of a Rays game is here over 15,000. We don't need to build them a 40,000 seat stadium. We need to put them in a retrofit Al Lang Stadium, 20,000 seats, and what that frees up the Tropicana site, the 85 acres for housing, for maybe a world-class convention center, and also a hub for big businesses to provide not only more jobs, but better jobs.
Thank you. Candidate Acosta.
There's many more ideas for what to do with the 85 acres, and there's time to discuss over here. One of your students, doctoral students, produced a fantastic paper on the history of the site, and it's very eye-opening. And we talk about the community that used to be there, and the racism that drove the black community out before we even destroyed it back in the 1980s, going all the way back to the 1930s. It is an open wound in this city and an open wound in our community, and we have an opportunity, regardless of what happens to the Rays, with or without them, to heal that wound, to mend the tear in the fabric of our culture, our society, our economy, that has left a very large part of our city disenfranchised from the success and the gains that the rest has achieved. We have to look at this holistically, and whatever solution were to be presented to me, I'd be looking at how well it gets us along to achieving that ideal of reunifying what is a great city.
Tropicana Field, what a wonderful opportunity for this city to do a couple of things. One, you can connect the downtown vitality to the neighborhoods, and two, it can serve as a healing piece for those communities that were disrupted, for its existence. I think, the investment in Tropicana Field will be an investment in the growth of the city of St. Petersburg. It's in the innovation district. There's Johns Hopkins Hospital there, and it can be used for internships. And there's also the University of South Florida right here. You can grow your graduate programs there. It could be an incubator for new businesses. It can happen there. We can actually have a hotel there, as well as a convention center, so that we can be, shall we say, more marketable for national events. And that's how everybody benefits. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity, whether we're talking about scenario one, that HKS architect put on the table to have it there as a stadium with 15, 20 of those acres used for that purpose, and the rest can certainly meet the better needs of the larger community.
Thank you. Candidate Big Sanders.
One thing for sure is come 2027, the Rays have the opportunity to leave whether we want them to or not. And of course, being a fan, I've seen some really wonderful things that the Rays Foundation has done within our community. As far as those 85 acres are concerned, the very first thing that needs to be addressed is how do you repay for the loss of the communities that were taken away? It's too late to heal. Those families are gone, those buildings are gone, the businesses are no longer viable, they're not there. So there's no healing that's gonna happen there, but you can definitely make it better by paying retribution to those communities and putting it back into the community that was taken away from the tribe. What I would like to see is definitely has to be revenue bearing, a convention center, multi-use, retail shops, but it has to be accessible to all of the residents, not just an extension from downtown, because not a lot of the minority and women-owned businesses can afford to go downtown. So we want to make sure that we keep that opportunity available for those different options that we have, but we definitely need to make sure that we find ways to financially correct the wrong.
Thank you. Candidate Kenyon.
I want those 100 businesses back. I want 300 of those people that had to be 300 of those homes that were destroyed, I want those back. I want the 800 people that were pushed out, I want them to come back home. And I want that land, the 85 acres, to go into a reparations land trust where the black community will get to determine what happens on that land, where we can have genuine economic development, genuine affordable housing, where we can create a community that has a vibrant economy contributing to the tax base of the entire city. You know, my opponent in this government has put forth something they call the Community Benefits Agreement, where they say that the black community can get 2% of what developers put there, and that's like somebody stealing $100 from me, then giving me $2 back in restitution. I want the whole thing back. My community deserves that entire community that was destroyed back, that has impacted us today. So we want to see that 85 acres of land as a form of reparations. So when someone asks me how does reparations happen, we say reparations looks like the 85 acres of land back to the black community.
Thank you. Candidate Willer Bowman.
Thank you. I just want to be clear about one thing. The city, I have been in talks about a community benefit agreement, and no percentage has been determined as of yet. My family was pushed out because of the trop. Several families were. And what I want to see there as a top priority is affordable housing. I want to make it a place for everyone. I don't want anyone to be priced out. I want it to be a place where it brings jobs, and it also for small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. And Candidate Blackman.
So the question was, what's the top priority for the redevelopment of the Trop? Well, my two top priorities are that it would be successful and inclusive. So how do we do this? Well, you know, as far as the Rays staying there going, there's a lot of fatigue there. That wasn't the question. We have to remember that the Rays are a independent business, right? So we can't mandate what site they go to if they stay. We can talk with them, but we can't mandate. So regardless of whether or not they stay, what I'd like to see done is I'd like to see, first of all, it made inclusive so that everybody in the community can benefit and use it, but also I want to see it reintegrated with the rest of the city. Currently, that site is just a atom bomb that was dropped in the middle of our city. It did wipe the gas plant district off the map, but it also broke our city into two big, segments between downtown and midtown. I used to live in midtown, walking and biking past there. It's unsafe, it's weird, there's no connectivity. So I want to see Booker Creek cleaned up and strengthened. I want to see hotels put there. We can also put businesses. We can have headquarters, office space, which is desperately needed. And on the back end, we can put workforce housing as well as commercial corridor down 16th Street to really tie the neighborhoods together. Thank you.
Thank you. This next round will be a lightning round, and we really want to keep it to yes or no answers. The first candidate to respond to this round will be candidate Cox. And the question is, do you believe the state legislature has overstepped its boundary in its preemption of home rule? Yes or no? Candidate Cox.
Yes.
Candidate Big Sanders.
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Wheeler Bowman.
Yes.
And back to candidate Blackman.
Yes.
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 Okay. The next question is going to our District 1 and 3 candidates. And the first to answer will be candidate Acosta, and this is a 60-second question. What is your experience working with citizens from various cultural backgrounds? What approaches have you used to ensure adequate attention is given to the varying needs of these groups?
I'm having difficulty answering that question only because that's pretty much what I've done my entire adult life. I grew up, my entire life actually, I grew up in not the melting pot of New York, but the smelter of New York City, and traveling in Manhattan every day as a teenager to go to school. I went into the Air Force Academy. I went to the Air Force where we had the best from across America come with a singular focus, which was to serve our country. Every race, every creed, every background, every socioeconomic level, all we cared about was doing our best and serving. And that continued for the 20+ years that I served in uniform. So it was always a focus on how do we work together, how do we cover each other's backs, and how do we move forward and meet the mission. And that's what I bring here to the city as well. Okay, how do we work together and how do we move our city forward? Do we include everybody? Do we consider everything? And do we move ahead? All right.
Thank you. Candidate Blackman.
All right, so again, the question was, what's your experience working with citizens of different backgrounds? So, born and raised in St. Petersburg, I'm a proud product of our public school system. I went to St. Pete High. I loved it there. I think we were a great melting pot. Everybody interacted. We got together as one. It's a great experience, the public school system here. So I'm a big fan of that and strengthening them in any way we can. Also, I've lived throughout the city. So I live in District 1 now. That's the district I'll be representing. My family has ties to that. But hey, before that, I've lived in almost every neighborhood in this city. So when you talk about different backgrounds, the last question I answered, I lived in Midtown. There was plenty of people there who were not from the same background as me, and we had a lot of differences. We got together, we lived as one. I lived in Coquina Key. I've lived downtown. I've done a lot of work in my private career in Northeast St. Pete, also in West St. Pete. So just being among the people and being accessible. And also, you know, last week I had a meeting, a follow-up meeting with a friend of mine. He's been struggling with a drug addiction for over 15 years. We spent 5 hours together talking things through and seeing how he is. I hang out with him a couple times a week, and you got to keep people accountable. So just understanding people, taking the time to listen, and dealing with everybody and treating them as equals.
Thank you. Candidate Hornbeck.
I was a youth development worker for the city of St. Pete, so we worked with kids of all backgrounds. It's a paid position. The summer before that, I was a volunteer. I logged over 250 hours of community service and was awarded the St. Pete Volunteer of the Year Award. I also worked with people from all types of backgrounds when I was coordinator of youth ministry at my church. These kids, their parents they weren't members. They'd walk or ride their bike, or I'd pick them up. That's why you see my Youth First initiative is so important, that I want all kids, despite their socioeconomic background, to have access to these programs. We have to take the kids off the street and put them into social and fitness-driven programs.
May I use a wild card on my own question? I don't think there's a rule against that.
No. No, sorry.
Okay.
Does anyone from the 5 or 7 want to use a wild card on this? Okay, so now we're turning to District 5 and 7 candidates, and the first candidate to answer this round will be candidate Kenyon, and this will be a 60-second question. How would you assess the city's efforts to update its sewage and stormwater infrastructure? What, if anything, should we be doing more of?
Well, when we look at the sewage infrastructure and we look at the situation that caused it And while, you know, the government will say that this was a problem that started long before our mayor, that our mayor had a responsibility to assume to fix, you know, that task of our antiquated sewage infrastructure, and instead he exacerbated it. And it was because of big development, dollar signs in his eyes, where he went against the workers and closed down a very critical sewage plant, where the workers were intimidated, harassed, you know, and, you know, threatened to be fired. They couldn't even, you know, I mean, if workers had power, that the workers who carry out the day-to-day work of this city that keep it functioning, we wouldn't have had that problem. That if big dollar signs were not in, you know, the mayor's eyes and this council's eyes, that we wouldn't have had the situation in the first place. And that, you know, resources invested into our sewage infrastructure, obviously very critical, but also a permanent end to the development of luxury condos and apartments that are putting strain on it. And that won't happen when the people that I'm running against are being funded by these same big developers.
Thank you. Candidate Wheeler-Bowman.
Thank you. Right now, there is a plan in place. We did have to get a master plan done, which was very important because we had not had one since, I believe it was 1999. There's no denying that our infrastructure is badly damaged. We have been repairing our pipes, lining them to protect them from I&I. We have also started a pilot program for the private laterals. So we are working on it, which it is going to take time. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Cox.
The sewage crisis that the city of St. Petersburg is experiencing demands greater attention. I know there's a $326 million plan to address, you know, the spillage, which was phenomenal in 2016. But what we're finding that even with the tropical rains, we still find continuous sewage spillage in our communities, in our waters. So we're not doing our best job. I think we have to rely a little bit more on a couple of things. Our scientific community. There's a Southeast Regional Planning Council that has looked at this issue of sewage and water quality. They've looked at these systems and they know what works. We have to take advantage of that opportunity in that planning. We also are going to have to expedite our timeline so that we can better address those pipes that need to be replaced. And thirdly, although we're using technology, I think we need to have great accountability and transparency, and so we might need to have that happen with more timely reports. Thank you.
Thank you. And Candidate Fix-Sanders.
Thank you. We are looking at 900 miles of sewage pipes that we need to actually repair. No, it was not the responsibility of this current administration with the condition of our sewage system, but it is the responsibility of this administration to put forth a greater effort to actually repair those. It goes back to no maintenance to low maintenance for years. 2 or 3 mayors prior to this one. However, this is such an absorbent issue that it's not just happening in one section of town. One thing that I do admire that the city actually provides reports of any type of leakage, of any type of water or sewage, any type of backups that we actually have. And the lateral linkage pilot program is happening in District 5, in Maximum Warnings and the greater Pinellas Point area. I'm hoping that the city will be able to work with the homeowners that do participate in that pilot, because it does affect and contribute to the overall